Hello, and welcome to another issue of the Numbers of Thoth. Today, we're looking into whether the ancient Egyptians were stay-at-home landlubbers or whether they were good sailors and happy to go to sea. As always, we'll take a deep dive into the evidence to see what we come up with. The ancient Egyptians are described as traders, but did the goods come to them, or was it the other way round? Archaeologists know trade occurred from the 5th century BCE onwards, especially with Canaan, Lebanon, Nubia and Punt. Trade with Punt gave Egyptians gold, aromatic resins, ebony, ivory, and wild animals. There was a well-traveled land route from the Nile to the Red Sea crossed through the Wadi Hammam. Egyptian manufactures dating from the same period, that is to the 5th millennium BCE, belonging to the Badarian culture, a people who lived in small villages in Upper Egypt, have been found in settlements as far north as Syria. In 1994, excavators discovered an incised ceramic shard with the Sarik sign of Nama, dating to around 3000 BCE. Mineralogical studies reveal the shard as a wine jar fragment exported from the Nile Valley to Palestine. Due to Egypt's climate, wine was nearly impossible to produce, so the wine probably came from Greece, showing trade links to ancient Greece and the Greek island cultures. The archaeological record shows that the pre-dynastic Mahdi people who lived south of Memphis imported pottery and construction ideas from Canaan, but whether these ideas and trade came to Egypt overland or by sea is still unanswered. Indeed, there is evidence of an Egyptian colony in southern Canaan at this time that produced Egyptian pottery for export to Egypt. So, were ancient Egyptian entrepreneurs exploiting cheaper labor abroad, or was it that the clay in Canaan made a type of pottery that could not be produced in Egypt? The answer is simple: we do not know. However, we know that the Egyptians were building ships by lashing planks of wood together and stuffing the gaps with reeds about this time. The Archaeological Institute of America reports that the first ship found to date was probably constructed for the Pharaoh Aha, around 3000 BCE, and was 75 feet long. Further evidence for boat building comes from the reign of Pharaoh Sneferu. The Palermo stone tells us that Sneferu built Tuatara, ships of Merwood of 100 capacity, that his army captured 60 royal boats of 16 capacity, and that he received 40 ships of cedar wood, or perhaps laden with cedar wood. The wood was most probably from Byblos, or Phoenicia, modern-day Lebanon. Recent discoveries on the Egyptian Red Sea coast also indicate that ancient Egyptians were heading east in their quest for material for their royal projects. The remains of a monumental harbour were discovered under the waves by members of the French Institute of Archaeology in Cairo and the Sorbonne University at Wadi El Jarf in 2014. The remains have been dated to 4,600 years ago, in the time of Khufu, the builder of the Great Pyramid of Giza, who reigned from 2580 to 2550 BCE. We can get some idea of the growing sophistication of Egyptian boat building at this time from the 142-foot-long ship that was found buried next to the Great Pyramid of Khufu at Giza. Known as the Royal Bark of Khufu and dates to around 2500 BC, the same time as the pyramid construction. The carpenters used mortise and tenon joints, and a frame lashed to the hull to keep the sides from sagging outward, but the boat had no keel, and it was to all intents and purposes a riverboat by design. It wasn't until around 1500 BC that Egyptians learned how to make keels and internally reinforced hulls. By the Old Kingdom, images of boats carrying everyday cargo, especially foodstuffs, are common in Egyptian Tumart. In general, the best evidence for Middle Kingdom seafaring reflects Red Sea shipping. One of the best-known Middle Kingdom Egyptian literary compositions, The Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor, is centered on a voyage to Punt. The details are given for the size of the sailor's ship, 120 cubits by 40 cubits, or about 60 meters by 20 meters. The boat has a crew of 120 men. The story, which we believe is primarily a mythical one, describes being shipwrecked on an island on a journey to the land of Punt. The boat is said to be carrying a cargo of myrrh and other oils, giraffe tails, and elephant ivory. One archaeologically documented Red Sea embarkation point to Punt during the Middle Kingdom was Oasis, where shrines were constructed from stone anchors to give offerings for the safe return of the sailors. Egyptian contacts with the Levantine coast, especially Byblos, and the island of Crete are also documented or suggested in the Middle Kingdom. The earliest images of seafaring come from the tomb of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. Her tomb art depicts a fantastic sea adventure. Dated to 1480 BC, the story recorded in her temple tells that Hatshepsut consulted her gods and was said to follow in the footsteps of her ancestors and re-establish old trading associations that had fallen into the hands of middlemen. In this inscription, a whole list of new titles appear, all connected with boats and sailing, such as fleet captain, captain of the ships of the king, captain of galleys, ship's captain, captains of marines, literally meaning captain of the ship, archers, officer of the ships, officer of marines, standard bearer of the ship, standard bearer of the marines, commander of the rowers, chief of the rowers, ship archers, and many more. We can get some idea of the size of these boats in a record describing a ship used by Queen Hatshepsut to carry obelisks to Karnak. It was larger and broader than Admiral Nelson's ship Victory. The vessel was 200 feet long and 70 feet in the beam. The ancient Egyptian navy. It seems that the Egyptians had a navy of some description. Indeed, the variety of Egyptian terms in use shows that the ancient Egyptians operated in a sophisticated maritime environment and that their nautical knowledge was quite broad. For instance, the Egyptian term for navigator was nefu. The word for helmsman was hemu or irihimit, and a ship's guardian was the sow. The transport officer was themshtbu. The oarsmen were the kaneet. The man at the prow or lookout was known as the irihat, literally meaning the one who is at the head. The only naval engagement portrayed in Egyptian art is the great battle against the people of the sea in the funerary temple of Rameses III at Medinet Habu, which appears to have taken place in the Nile Delta, not in the open sea. And it is not clear that any of the vessels involved were actually Egyptian, if by that we mean ships built, crewed, and commanded by Egyptians. Notably, the ships on both sides of the battle are rigged with a new, non-Egyptian technology called brails. A rig that could be described as a Venetian blind-like sail with cords that permitted rapid shortening and lengthening. And the attire of the great majority of Egyptian marines suggests that they could be ethnically or culturally connected to the invading sea peoples. If so, it could be that the Egyptian fleet was actually bought in. It seems seagoing boats were not the ancient Egyptians' forte. As can be seen in the Third Intermediate Period literary composition that describes the experiences of a priest of Amun who is dispatched to Phoenicia to secure wood for the renovation of the sacred bark of Amun. In this tale, the priest has to endure sneers of the Phoenicians, who point out that he, the great Egyptian, has come to Lebanon on a foreign ship. In fact, the ancient Egyptians never had a great sea-going navy either. The great stele of the Nubian king Pianki 747–716 BC describes the fleet used to move his troops against his Libyan enemies in the Egyptian delta. He captured every ship in the harbor at Memphis, then he ordered his troops to enter the city across the river. They did so, slaying many and taking many captives. So, it was hardly what we would call a sea battle. And of course, Cleopatra VII, the last queen of Egypt, lost one of the greatest sea battles in history, the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. The naval battle was fought between a maritime fleet led by the Roman Octavian, later Emperor Augustus, and the combined fleets of Mark Antony and Cleopatra Philopator on the 2nd of September 31 BC in the Ionian Sea. It was the climax of over a decade of rivalry between Octavian and Antony and brought about the demise of Cleopatra's Egypt. To summarize, The earliest Egyptian boats were practical craft used for fishing and transportation rather than physical embodiments of Egyptian sea power. Fragmentary reliefs from the 5th dynasty King Sahura's temple show a fleet of sea-going ships returning from an expedition. They were crewed by approximately 20 people, Egyptians, Syrians and perhaps other maritime peoples. Egyptian sea power must have developed over the 1,000 years between the Old Kingdom and the New, but it is only possible to reconstruct the organization of the Egyptian maritime forces from the New Kingdom onwards. The reliefs of Queen Hatshepsut's expedition to Punt, constructed around 1460 BC, and found in her funerary temple at Deir el-Bahari, provide some of the clearest evidence for sea-going ships of the New Kingdom. The reliefs portray 8 ships arriving at Punt, loading cargo, and departing Punt for their return journey on the Red Sea. The Punt ships were similar to other New Kingdom traveling ships, except they were much more streamlined, with deeper drafts and hogging trusses in place to counter the rougher waters of the Red Sea. The main depiction of warships also comes from the New Kingdom, with a naval battle scene on the temple of Rameses III at Medinet Habu, on the western bank at Thebes. The scene depicts the naval battle as having a fleet of 5 warships belonging to the Sea People being attacked by 4 Egyptian warships with Egyptian troops, including the king, supporting their ships from ashore. However, for the rest of Phoenician time, maritime defense was for the most part based upon effective border protection, using frontier posts backed up by fleets in the south, east and west and, when required, supported by the main or reserve Egyptian fleet based at the capital, Memphis. The Egyptian Nile fleet was rarely employed in times of civil war, in defense of Egypt, or in enforcement-type constabulary tasks. Most of the time, the Egyptian maritime forces were employed to maintain the peace. The fleet was not kept tied up to mooring posts in the major harbors, as the ancient Egyptians often used maritime forces in support of the state, in managing trade and customs duties, in transporting surplus products and prestige commodities where required within Egypt, in building projects. The fleet was more a form of floating propaganda than a true defense force. So, yes, the ancient Egyptians did go to sea, but they mainly used other people's ships and crews. They brought in expertise and never developed a sea-going way of life like the Phoenicians, and the Greeks. If you have enjoyed this video, or found it useful, please don't forget to hit the like button. If you would like to find out more about the amazing world of ancient Egypt, why not subscribe to the Numbers of Thoth, so you never miss an episode. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time for another deep dive into ancient history.